When I picked up the phone to ask my son Daniel when my grandson's baptism would be, my daughter-in-law Jessica looked me straight in the eye and said with a chilling smile, "Oh, he was baptized last week. We only invited our closest people." The words hit me like a bucket of ice water. Closest people. Me, who for 2 years had paid the monthly daycare of $800, bought all the nursery furniture and filled their fridge when they had nothing to eat. I wasn't a close person. I stood there in the living room of my own house, holding the phone like it weighed 450 pounds, watching my son avoid my gaze while Jessica settled into the couch that I had bought for them. The white baptism gown I had chosen for Noah hanging uselessly in my closet, along with the silver cross necklace and the illusion of being part of the most important day of my grandson's life. I spent $300 on that little outfit, thinking about how beautiful Noah would look in the baptism photos I would never appear in. For weeks, I planned every detail. I had saved money to give them $1,500 as a gift for Noah's college fund. I called my sister Diana in Chicago to share the good news. I cleaned my house from top to bottom, thinking they might come celebrate with me after the ceremony. All of it crumbled in 1 second with those 4 poisonous words. Only closest people. Daniel finally looked up and said in a rehearsed voice, "Mom, it was an intimate thing, very small, just us and the godparents." But I knew it was a lie. I saw the photos on social media. I saw Jessica's parents posing proudly next to the baby. I saw her siblings toasting with champagne. I saw Jessica's white dress, which I helped finance with the $800 I gave her last month for her personal expenses. I saw everything I wasn't supposed to see. 2 weeks later, exactly 14 days after that humiliation, Jessica called me with a completely different voice. She was no longer the confident woman who had excluded me from my grandson's baptism. Now she sounded desperate, almost begging. "Margaret, the daycare is demanding payment. They're threatening to remove Noah from the list if we don't pay this week. Your son said you'd cover the first year of diapers. Did you forget to make the transfer?" Her voice trembled slightly, as if the world were ending. I was silent for a few seconds, remembering all the times I rushed to the bank to make that transfer. All the times I canceled my own plans to ensure they had care for Noah. All the times I ate pasta and canned soup so I could give them money for their wants. And now, after they had excluded me from the most important moment of my grandson's life, they had the audacity to call me as if nothing had happened. "Jessica," I said, with a calm that surprised even me, "didn't I tell you that I only help close people?" The silence on the other end of the line was so deep I could hear my own heartbeat. For the first time in years, it wasn't me who was trembling, but her. "Margaret, I don't understand," she stammered. "We've always been close to you. You're like a second mother to me." Lies. All lies. Wrapped in that sweet voice she only used when she needed something. The same voice she used to ask me for money for maternity clothes, for the crib, for special diapers, which I helped finance without knowing I would never see the ceremony where my grandson was blessed. For so many years, I had this constant feeling of walking on eggshells, weighing every word, every gesture, every gift, hoping to receive a crumb of affection from my own son. I was the perfect grandmother, the helpful mother-in-law, the silent provider who never protested when they treated me like I was invisible. But that phrase, "only closest people," awakened something in me that had been dormant for a long time. I had mentally calculated how much money I spent on them in those 2 years. Between daycare, food, gifts, emergencies, and whims, it was more than $2,800. $28,500 that I took from my retirement, from my savings, from the money my late husband Harold had left so I could live my final years in peace. And for what? To be treated like a stranger at my own grandson's baptism. That night after I hung up, I sat on the bed and cried. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of anger, of accumulated frustration, of years of silently endured humiliation. I cried for all the times they made me feel that my love was a burden, my presence an obstacle, my money the only thing I had to offer. I cried for the foolish grandmother I had been, for the woman who lost herself trying to be indispensable to those who considered her dispensable. When I woke up the next morning, something inside me had changed. It wasn't just the pain of betrayal. It was something deeper, colder. I got up and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. The same tired eyes as always. The same wrinkles that told stories of years of giving love without receiving it in return. But there was something else in my gaze, a hardness I didn't recognize, a determination that had been buried under years of compliance. I went to the kitchen and made coffee, as I had done every morning for 40 years. But this time, I didn't think about calling Daniel to ask how he had slept. I didn't check my phone expecting a message from him apologizing for the previous day's humiliation. For the first time in a long time, I was my own first concern of the day. I sat at the table where I had so many times planned surprises for them, counted bills for their expenses, and cried silently when they treated me with indifference. Now, this table would witness something completely different. I took out my checkbook, my bank statements, and began to do the math. I wanted to see in exact numbers the extent of my own foolishness. Monthly daycare of $800 multiplied by 24 months, $19,200. Diapers and supplies approximately $150 per month for 18 months, $2,700. Birthday gifts, Christmas presents, baby milestones, at least $2,500. Noah's medical emergencies, $200. The car loan they never paid me back, $2,000. Baptism outfit and special gifts, $900. $28,500. That was the exact amount of my generosity. I had wasted $28,500 of my husband's inheritance, of my pension, of the savings I had saved penny by penny during decades of honest work. All that money thrown out the window to keep two comfortable adults who couldn't even pretend to respect me. The phone rang and I saw Daniel's name on the screen. Normally, my heart would have raced as I ran to answer, hoping he would finally apologize and explain that everything had been a misunderstanding. But this time, I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Finally, it went silent, and I continued drinking my coffee as if nothing had happened. 10 minutes later, it rang again. This time, it was Jessica. I let it ring too. Then, a message from Daniel arrived. "Mom, please answer. We need to talk." I deleted the message without responding. At 2 p.m., I decided to take a walk. I hadn't done this in months without a specific purpose, without a task related to them. It was always the bank for transfers, the grocery store to buy something they needed, the pharmacy for Noah's medicines. Today, I went for a walk just because I wanted to. I passed by the park where I used to take Daniel as a child. I remembered that sweet boy who hugged me tight and said I was the best mother in the world. When did he become this man who treated me like an ATM with feelings? When did I start confusing love with money? When did I start believing I had to buy my own son's affection? At the bank, where I had so many times made automatic transfers, I stopped in front of the door. The branch manager, Mr. Williams, saw me through the glass and waved. I had known him for years. He had processed all my transfers to Daniel and Jessica. He had watched my account drain month after month to fill theirs. I walked in and went directly to his office. "Mr. Williams," I said to him, "I need to cancel the automatic transfers I have scheduled." He looked at me surprised. For 2 years, these transfers had been as regular as the sunrise. "Are you sure, Mrs. Thompson? Did something happen?" His concern was genuine, more genuine than any interest Daniel had shown in me in recent months. "What happened is that I finally opened my eyes," I replied. "I want to cancel everything, and I also want information on how to protect my accounts. I don't want anyone else to have access to my money." While Mr. Williams processed the cancellations, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Daniel, Jessica, Daniel again. It was as if they had developed radar to detect when their income source was in danger. I turned off the phone completely. "Mrs. Thompson," Mr. Williams said as he handed me the papers, "I apologize for intruding, but in all these years, I've seen you be very generous with your family. I hope you're not being pressured to make these changes." His words touched me deeply. This man, who barely knew me beyond banking transactions, showed more genuine concern for my well-being than my own son. I'm not being pressured, Mr. Williams. On the contrary, I finally stopped pressuring myself. When I left the bank, I felt strangely light, as if I had left an enormous burden in that office. For the first time in years, my money was entirely mine. I had no financial obligations to people who saw me as a resource instead of a person. I went home and thought about all the things I didn't do to please Daniel and Jessica, the trips I didn't take to save money for them, the friends I no longer saw because I was always available for their emergencies, the hobbies I had abandoned because every dollar I spent on myself was one less dollar for their needs. When I got home, I found 3 cars parked in front of my door. Daniel's, Jessica's, and one I didn't recognize. I could see movement inside my house through the windows. My blood ran cold. They had keys. I had given them keys because I trusted them, because I thought that one day they would take care of me just as I had taken care of them. I took a deep breath before opening the door. It was time for the first real confrontation of my new life. I opened the door to my house and saw a scene I will never forget. Daniel was sitting on my couch with his head in his hands. Jessica was pacing back and forth like a caged animal, and an older man I didn't know was going through papers on my dining table. My papers, my personal documents. "What's going on here?" I asked in a voice that sounded louder than I expected. All 3 looked at me as if I were an intruder in my own house. Jessica was the first to speak, and her voice had that desperate urgency I had already heard on the phone. "Margaret, thank God you're here. We need to talk. Mr. Peterson is from the law firm we consulted about your situation." "My situation?" The question came out of my mouth with a calm that surprised me. "What situation? I'm perfectly fine." Daniel finally raised his head and looked at me with those eyes that once belonged to an innocent child and now only reflected financial panic. "Mom, we went to the bank and they told us you canceled all the transfers. Mr. Williams explained that you also blocked our access to your accounts. We don't understand why you did this." Mr. Peterson, a man in his 50s in a gray suit with a smile that didn't inspire confidence, approached me with his hand extended. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm Dr. Peterson, family law attorney. Your children are concerned about your mental well-being and asked me to assess the situation." I didn't shake his hand. Instead, I went directly to my dining table and collected all my documents that he was reviewing without my permission. "These are my private documents. You have no right to look at them without my consent." "Mom," Daniel interrupted with that condescending tone he had perfected in recent years, "we're worried about you. Your behavior has been very strange lately. First, you cut us off financially without any explanation. Then, you don't answer our calls. We think you might need professional help." Jessica approached and tried to hold my hand with that false tenderness she reserved for moments when she needed something. "Margaret, dear, we know you're under a lot of stress. Maybe the loneliness is affecting you more than you think. At your age, episodes of confusion are normal." The word confusion echoed in my head like an alarm. Now I understood why they brought the lawyer. It wasn't about helping me. It was about declaring me mentally incompetent and taking control of my finances. The same woman who told me they only invited closest people to the baptism was now treating me like a senile old woman. "I'm not confused," I said, with a firmness that silenced everyone. "I'm clearer than I've ever been, and you're going to leave my house right now. Mr. Peterson interrupted with that professional tone lawyers use when they want to sound reasonable. "Mrs. Thompson, I understand you feel overwhelmed, but your children have the right to intervene if they believe your ability to make financial decisions is impaired. They've documented several concerning behaviors." Concerning behaviors. The laugh that came from my throat was harsh, almost cruel. "Like what? Deciding that my money belongs to me? Deciding not to finance the lives of 2 adults who treat me like garbage anymore?" Jessica jumped as if I had slapped her. "We never treated you badly. You're part of our family. Everything you have will belong to us one day anyway. We're just speeding up the process." There was the naked truth. Everything I had would belong to them one day. In their minds, I was already dead, and they were just collecting their inheritance early. It didn't matter if I had 68 years or 68 days left. To them, I was just an ATM with legs that had become problematic. "Get out," I said, pointing to the door. "All three of you get out of my house." Daniel stood up with that angry child face he made when he couldn't get what he wanted. "Mom, we can't just leave. We have obligations. The daycare, the car payments, the credit card you co-signed. You can't just cut us off overnight." "Can't I?" My voice rose for the first time in the entire conversation. "Who said I can't? For years, I paid for daycare that wasn't even in my name. I filled a refrigerator in a house where I wasn't welcome. I financed a life that clearly had no place for me." Mr. Peterson took a folder from his briefcase and placed it on my table. "Mrs. Thompson, we've prepared some documents that could facilitate this transition. A power of attorney that would allow Daniel and Jessica to manage your finances more efficiently. It would only be temporary until you feel better." I took the folder and, without even opening it, threw it directly in the trash. "The only transition that's going to happen here is yours to the front door." Jessica started crying, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of frustration, of contained rage. "You can't do this to us, Margaret. We were counting on you. We made plans based on your support. We bought things. We took on financial obligations because we knew we could count on you." "Obligations based on my money," I replied. "Not on my well-being, not on my happiness, not on my company, just on my money. And now that I've decided my money is better used on my own life, I'm suddenly a confused old woman who needs legal guardianship." Daniel tried to approach me, but I stepped back. He was no longer the boy who ran into my arms when he had nightmares. He was a 32-year-old man who saw his mother as an obstacle between him and a comfortable life financed by others. "Mom, we made mistakes," he said, with a voice that should have sounded repentant. "The baptism was a misunderstanding. Jessica was nervous. I was under pressure. We can fix this if you just go back to being reasonable." Reasonable? The word had a bitter taste in my mouth. Being reasonable means continuing to pay for your lives while you treat me like a stranger? It means pretending it doesn't hurt to have been excluded from the most important day of my grandson's life? Mr. Peterson packed his papers with the efficiency of someone accustomed to having proposals rejected. "Mrs. Thompson, this isn't over. Your family has legal options. If you're really making irrational decisions due to mental health issues, a judge can determine that you need guardianship." His words were like a blow. I realized this wasn't just a manipulative family visit. It was a real legal threat. They wanted to declare me incompetent to manage my own affairs. "Mr. Peterson," I said, looking him directly in the eyes, "I suggest you do your research thoroughly before threatening a 68-year-old woman who has managed her finances impeccably for 40 years, who raised her son alone after her husband's death, who managed a household and worked honorably until retirement, and who until 2 weeks ago financially supported 2 completely capable adults." Jessica stopped crying and looked at me with a coldness that finally revealed her true face. "This isn't going to end like this, Margaret. We have rights and lawyers, too." "Perfect," I replied. "Hire all the lawyers you want. With your own money, of course, because mine is no longer available to finance your legal tantrums." All three walked to the door with the wounded dignity of people who aren't used to hearing no. Before leaving, Daniel turned to me one last time. "Mom, this is going to end very badly for you. You're going to end up alone with no one to take care of you when you really need it." "Daniel," I said with deep sadness, but also with crystal clarity, "I'm already alone. The difference is that now it's by my own choice, not because of your neglect." When I closed the door behind them, I stood in my living room, surrounded by the most beautiful silence I had heard in years. It was the silence of freedom. That night, I couldn't sleep, but not from sadness or regret, but from adrenaline from having regained control of my own life. I lay awake in bed, planning my next steps like a general preparing for battle. If Daniel and Jessica wanted to fight, I would give them a war, but it would be a war I would fight with intelligence, not emotion. At 6 a.m., I was already dressed and ready to go. My first stop was the office of attorney Sarah Mitchell, a woman I had met years ago when I was handling my husband's will. Unlike Mr. Peterson, whom Daniel and Jessica brought, Sarah had an impeccable reputation and specialized in protecting the rights of the elderly. "Mrs. Thompson," she told me as I explained the situation, "what your children tried to do yesterday is more common than you think. It's called elder financial abuse, and it's a federal crime. The fact that they entered your house without permission and reviewed your private documents also constitutes a violation." Her words both calmed and worried me. They calmed me because they confirmed I wasn't crazy, that what had happened was truly abusive. They worried me because I realized the situation was more serious than I thought. "We have to document everything," Sarah continued. "Every transfer, every gift, every time they pressured you for money. We'll also change your will to protect your assets from future manipulation attempts." We spent 3 hours reviewing my financial records. Sarah whistled when she saw the total sum. $28,500 in 2 years. "Mrs. Thompson, with that money, you could have lived comfortably, traveled, and enjoyed your retirement. Instead, you completely financed the lives of 2 adults who didn't even respect you enough to invite you to your grandson's baptism." When I left Sarah's office, I had a complete plan. First, I would change all the locks on my house. Second, I would install a security system with cameras to protect myself from future surprise visits. Third, I would open a new bank account at a different bank where they had no contact. And fourth, I would start living the life I had postponed for years. My next stop was the hardware store. The owner, Mr. Davis, had known me for years because I was always buying things to fix Daniel and Jessica's apartment. This time was different. "Mrs. Thompson, what brings you here today? Another emergency with your son?" he asked with the familiarity of someone who had silently witnessed my wasted generosity. "No, Mr. Davis. This time it's for my own house. I need to change all the locks, and I want them to be the best quality." He looked at me surprised, but didn't ask questions. While I was choosing the locks, his son Ryan, who installed security systems, came by. It was Providence in action. "Ryan," I said to him, "I also need to install surveillance cameras, the complete system. Price is no object." While they prepared everything for installation the next day, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Jessica calling from someone else's phone because I had blocked her number after the previous day's confrontation. "Margaret, this is Jessica. Please don't hang up. We need to talk like civilized adults." "Speak," I said dryly. "Listen, I understand you're upset about the baptism. It was a mistake. Daniel and I have already talked about it, and we want to make it up to you. How about we have a special dinner to celebrate Noah's baptism with you? We can do it at your house, cook together like we used to." The manipulation in her words was so obvious I almost had to laugh. "Jessica, exactly how much do you owe in daycare?" The silence on the other end confirmed I had hit a nerve. Well, it's 2 months. Total of $1,600. But I'm not asking just for that, Margaret. We really miss you in our lives." "Do you miss me or my money?" I asked directly. "Both," she answered with surprising honesty. "Margaret, I won't lie to you. Yes, we need your financial help, but we also love you. You're important to us." "If I'm so important," I said, "why wasn't I important enough to be at Noah's baptism? Why am I not important enough to have a phone call that doesn't ask for money? When was the last time you called me just to ask how I was?" Another silence. We both knew the answer. Never. "Jessica, I'm only going to explain this to you once. For 2 years, you treated me like an ATM with feelings. You used me, you ignored me, you humiliated me, and finally, you insulted me in the worst possible way. Now that the money is running out, you suddenly discover that you love me." "Margaret, please," I interrupted her. "There is no please. You made your choice when you decided I wasn't close enough to be at Noah's baptism. Now I'm making mine." I hung up the phone and turned it off completely. I didn't want any more interruptions on my Liberation Day. That afternoon, I went to the beauty salon where I hadn't been in over a year. I always canceled my appointments because Daniel or Jessica needed something urgent, or because the money I had set aside for myself became an emergency for them. "Mrs. Thompson!" my favorite hairstylist Cynthia exclaimed. "What a surprise! I thought you had forgotten about us." "I didn't forget about you, Cynthia. I just forgot that I also deserve to be pampered. I treated myself to the full treatment. Cut, color, manicure, pedicure. For the first time in years, I spent money on myself without feeling guilty. While Cynthia worked on my hair, she told me about her life, her children, her dreams. It was refreshing to have a conversation that didn't revolve around Daniel and Jessica's needs. "You look beautiful, Mrs. Thompson," she said when she finished. "But more than that, you look free. Did something good happen?" "Yes, Cynthia. I finally learned to say no." When I got home that afternoon, there was a car in front of my door that I didn't recognize. My heart raced for a moment, thinking Daniel and Jessica might have returned with reinforcements. But as I approached, I saw an older woman sitting on my porch steps. "Mrs. Thompson?" she asked when I got out of the car. "Yes, that's me. Can I help you?" "I'm Eleanor Brooks. I live next door. We've been neighbors for years, but we've never had the chance to talk. Yesterday, I heard very loud voices from your house, and I was worried. Is everything okay?" Her sincere concern touched me deeply. Here was a stranger showing more interest in my well-being than my own son. "Come in, Mrs. Brooks. I'll make you some coffee and tell you a story you won't believe." While I made coffee, I told her the whole situation. Eleanor listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally. And when I finished my story, her eyes were filled with tears. "Mrs. Thompson," she said, "you did the right thing. I went through something similar with my daughter 5 years ago. I also thought it was my duty to finance her adult life. I also believed they wouldn't love me if I didn't give them money. What happened? I cut off the money when I realized they only called when they needed something. At first it was terrible. They threatened me, emotionally blackmailed me, tried to make me feel guilty. But after 6 months, my daughter called to genuinely apologize. Now we have a real relationship based on love, not money." Her words gave me hope and confirmed I had made the right decision. "Do you think Daniel and Jessica will come around one day?" "Maybe yes, maybe not," she answered honestly. "But that's no longer your responsibility, Mrs. Thompson. Your responsibility now is to live your own life." That night, for the first time in 2 years, I went to bed without worrying whether Daniel and Jessica had money for daycare, for food, for their whims. I went to bed thinking about myself, my plans, my future, and slept better than I had in years. The next day, Ryan and Mr. Davis arrived at 8 a.m. to change the locks and install the security system. While they worked, my phone wouldn't stop ringing from unknown numbers. Jessica was still trying to contact me from different phones, but I had developed a new skill, completely ignoring calls that didn't please me. "Mrs. Thompson," Ryan said while installing the cameras, "this system will give you absolute peace of mind. You can see from your phone who's coming to your house even when you're not here. And if anyone breaks in without permission, an alert is automatically sent to the police." The irony wasn't lost on me. I was installing a security system to protect myself from my own son, but it didn't hurt as much as before. It was simply a practical measure to maintain my newfound peace. While they were working, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I called my sister Diana in Chicago. We had lost touch because every time we talked, I told her about Daniel and Jessica's successes, about how much money I had spent on them, about how proud I was to be able to help them. Now I realized our conversations had become financial reports disguised as family news. "Margaret," Diana answered, surprised. "Sister, how are you? We haven't talked in months." "I'm fine, Diana. More than fine. I'm calling to say I finally came to my senses." I told her the whole story from the beginning. The secret baptism, the humiliation, the visit with the lawyer, my decision to cut off funding. Diana listened in silence, and when I finished, her response surprised me. "Margaret, sister, it was about time. Every time we talked, it broke my heart to hear you brag about how much money you gave them, as if love could be measured in dollars. I wanted to tell you something, but I didn't know how." "What did you want to tell me?" "That Daniel never spoke of you with affection when I saw him at family gatherings. It was always, 'My mom helped me with this,' or 'My mom bought me that,' but never, 'I miss my mom,' or 'I love my mom.' Juan, it was as if you were a service provider, not a person." Her words hurt, but it was necessary pain. Like when a doctor cleans an infected wound, it hurts, but it's part of healing. You know what else I noticed? Diana continued. Jessica always talked about you in the future tense. When Margaret is no longer here, we can renovate her house. Or, when we inherit, we can invest in the business. As if they were waiting for you to die to really live. This revelation hit me like a bucket of ice water. They didn't just see me as an ATM. They saw me as a temporary obstacle between them and my money. While I was trying to make them happy, they were planning their future without me. After talking with Diana, I sat in the kitchen processing all this information. Years of marriage to a man who truly loved me. 32 years raising my son alone after my husband's death. And 2 years financing 2 adults who saw me as a $100,000 obstacle. The doorbell rang, and on the new cameras, I saw it was Eleanor with a mug in her hands. I opened the door, and she handed me fresh coffee. I thought you might need company after everything you told me yesterday, she said with that sincere smile I had learned to appreciate. We sat in my living room, and Eleanor told me more details of her own experience. My daughter told me exactly the same things Jessica tells you. You're like a second mother to me. We're special to you. Everything will be ours one day anyway. These are rehearsed phrases, Mrs. Thompson. They learned this from the Emotional Manipulation Handbook. Do you think that handbook exists? I asked, half-jokingly. Not officially, but it seems like everyone reads the same book. Chapter 1 is Make Her Feel Indispensable. Chapter 2 is Create Constant Financial Emergencies. Chapter 3 is When She Resists, Question Her Mental Health. We laughed, but it was bitter laughter. It was funny and tragic to recognize such predictable patterns in our own children's behavior. Did you ever feel guilty about cutting off the money? I asked Eleanor. Every day for the first 3 months, she answered honestly. But then I started seeing results. My daughter had to get a second job. Her husband stopped playing golf every weekend and started looking for extra work. They learned to live within their means. And most importantly, they learned I was a person, not a resource. That afternoon, I decided to do something I had postponed for years. Visit my husband's grave. I always made excuses not to go because Daniel or Jessica needed something urgent or because the taxi fare was better invested in one of their emergencies. The cemetery was quiet and beautiful. Harold's grave looked a bit neglected because I hadn't been there to clean it in months. I sat on the grass next to his headstone and talked to him as if he were alive. Harold, my love, I think I lost myself for a while. After you left, I put all my energy into Daniel. I wanted to be the best mother in the world, thinking that somehow he would grow up without a father, but I think in the process, I forgot to be myself. The wind blew gently, and for a moment it seemed like he was listening to me. Our son became someone I don't recognize. Or maybe he was always like this, and I didn't want to see it. His wife is something else, you know how she is. The money you left for me to live in peace, I spent taking care of them. But no more, my love. I've learned. I cleaned his grave, replaced the wilted flowers with new ones, and stayed there for another hour, simply enjoying the peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't in a hurry to get home to solve a crisis for Daniel and Jessica. When I got home, there were 3 cars parked in front of my door again. My heart raced, but this time I was prepared. The cameras showed me it was Daniel, Jessica, and 2 other people I didn't recognize. They all looked agitated, talking among themselves and pointing at my house. I didn't get out of the car. Instead, I called Sarah, my lawyer. Sarah, they're at my house again. This time they brought more people. What should I do? Don't get out of the car, Mrs. Thompson. I'll be there immediately and I'll call the police. After our conversation yesterday, I requested a temporary restraining order. They're not allowed to be on your property. Minutes later, Sarah and 2 police cars arrived. I watched the officers talking to Daniel and Jessica. I saw my son gesturing angrily. I saw Jessica crying again, but this time her tears didn't move me. One of the officers approached my car. "Ma'am, you can get out safely. Your visitors are leaving immediately." As soon as I got out of the car, Daniel shouted at me from the street. "Mom, this is ridiculous. We're your family. You can't call the police on your own son." "Daniel," I replied, with a calm that surprised even me. "Family doesn't threaten with mental incompetency lawsuits. Family doesn't invade people's houses without permission. Family doesn't treat mothers like ATMs. Jessica shouted from across the street. You're going to pay us everything you owe us. We have bills you co-signed. You can't just abandon us like this, Sarah interrupted. Mrs. Brooks, any future communication must be through my office, and I suggest you consult a lawyer before making collection threats because my client has complete documentation of all payments she made voluntarily for 2 years. I watched them leave in their cars, defeated but not giving up. I knew this wasn't over, but for the first time in this situation, I felt confident. I had professional help. I had emotional support from Eleanor. And most importantly, I had mental clarity about what was right and what was wrong. That night, Eleanor invited me to dinner at her house. I met her daughter who was visiting, and I could see with my own eyes what a healthy family relationship looked like. They spoke respectfully to each other, asked sincerely about each other's lives, and laughed together. The daughter didn't ask for money once during the entire evening. I wanted that with Daniel too, I confessed to Eleanor after her daughter left. And maybe you'll get it one day, she replied. But first, he has to learn that you're a person who deserves respect, not just a source of income. For the first time in weeks, I went to bed feeling hopeful about the future. The following days were strangely peaceful. The surveillance cameras showed me that Daniel and Jessica drove by my house several times a day, sometimes slowly, sometimes parking for a few minutes, but never getting out. It was as if they were studying my routine, looking for the perfect moment for the next step. Sarah advised me to document each of these visits, so I kept a detailed record with date and time. Their persistence will work in our favor, she said. Every time they show up after we told them to stay away, it strengthens our case for a permanent restraining order. On Friday morning, I was calmly having breakfast when the doorbell rang. The cameras showed me a very well-dressed woman with a briefcase in her hands and a professional smile. I didn't recognize her, but there was something in her posture that told me this wasn't a social visit. "Good morning, Mrs. Margaret Thompson," she said when I opened the door. "I'm a social investigator from the Office of Elder Services. We received a report that you may be in a risk situation and we need to conduct a welfare check." My blood ran cold. Daniel and Jessica had escalated the situation. It was no longer just threats from private lawyers. Now they were involving the government. "May I see your identification?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "Of course." She showed me an official ID that looked genuine. "I'm social worker Mrs. Schmidt. May I come in and speak with you?" I let her in, knowing that a refusal would have been worse for my case. Mrs. Schmidt sat in my living room and took out a form from her briefcase. "Mrs. Thompson, we received reports that you've shown significant changes in your financial behavior, that you've cut communication with your family, and demonstrated signs of paranoia by installing unnecessary security systems. We were also told that you refused medical and legal assistance from your loved ones." Every word was carefully chosen to make me seem like a mentally disturbed old woman. I recognized Jessica's handwriting in the text. She had always been skilled at manipulating words to get what she wanted. "Miss Schmidt," I said with all the dignity I could muster, "I would like to call my lawyer before answering any questions." "Ma'am, this isn't a legal interrogation. It's a welfare check. If you have nothing to hide, it shouldn't be a problem to talk to me." The phrase, "if you have nothing to hide," infuriated me. It was the same logic abusers used to justify their invasions. If you're innocent, you shouldn't complain about violation of your privacy. "Miss, I'm going to call my lawyer. You can wait here or come back another day, but I won't answer any questions without legal representation present." I called Sarah, and she arrived in 20 minutes. When she entered and saw the social worker, her expression hardened. "Miss Schmidt," she said, after checking her identification, "I hope you have a court order to be here, because my client is under my legal representation, and any unauthorized investigation constitutes harassment." "Ma'am," Mrs. Schmidt replied with less confidence than before, "we received reports from concerned family members about the lady's well-being. It's our duty to investigate." "What family?" Sarah asked dryly. "The same family that tried to get her to sign a power of attorney without representation? The same family that invaded her house without permission and checked her private documents? The same family that excluded her from important events while living off her money? Sarah took a folder from her briefcase and placed it on the table. Here, I have complete documentation of my client's financial and emotional abuse. $28,500 that was withdrawn from her accounts over 2 years. Systematic social exclusion and emotional blackmail. If anyone needs to be investigated here, it's not my client. Mrs. Schmidt reviewed the documents with growing discomfort. It was obvious that the information she had been given didn't match the reality she had before her. "Mrs. Thompson," she said finally, "can you explain to me why you so abruptly stopped financial support for your son?" "Because I finally discovered they were using me," I replied simply. "Because I realized that to them, I wasn't a mother, but a bank account. Because I was tired of financing the lives of people who saw me as an obstacle." "But don't you feel it's your responsibility to help your family?" The question outraged me. "Miss Schmidt, my responsibility as a mother was to raise my son until he was 18, educate him, and give him the tools to be an independent adult. My son is 32 years old, married, and perfectly capable of supporting himself. Financing his adult life is not my responsibility. It's my choice, and I chose not to do it anymore." Sarah interrupted. "Miss Schmidt, would you consider it normal for a 32-year-old adult to be unable to pay his own child's daycare without help from his 68-year-old mother?" Mrs. Schmidt didn't answer immediately. I realized she was reevaluating the entire situation. "Mrs. Thompson," she asked after a moment, "do you manage your finances completely? I can show you my bank statements, my investments, my tax payments. Everything is up to date and in order. Do you live independently? As you can see, I maintain my house clean. I take care of myself physically. I drive my own car. I have healthy social relationships with my neighbors. Do you take any medications?" "Only vitamins and occasionally aspirin." "I don't have any medical condition that requires medication," Sarah added. "My client just underwent extensive medical examinations as part of our legal process. She's in perfect physical and mental condition." Mrs. Schmidt closed her briefcase. "Mrs. Thompson, based on this conversation and the documentation I've reviewed, I see no indication that you're at risk or need intervention. I'm closing this case." After she left, Sarah and I remained silent for a few minutes. "Margaret," she said finally, "this is going to continue to escalate. Daniel and Jessica are spending money they don't have to hire professionals to try to have you declared incompetent. Does that mean they're desperate?" "Exactly. What else can they do? They can file an incompetency lawsuit. It's expensive and hard to win. But if they find a sympathetic judge and a psychiatrist willing to testify on their behalf, they could get a guardian appointed." The idea terrified me. "They could take control of my money. They could try, but we have solid evidence that you're completely competent and that they're motivated by greed, not genuine concern." 1 month after the social worker's visit, I thought I had finally won the war. I had settled into a beautiful routine. I calmly had breakfast and read the newspaper. I tended to my garden, had lunch with Eleanor or one of my new friends. And in the afternoons, I dedicated myself to activities I had abandoned years ago. I had returned to painting, something I was passionate about before becoming Daniel and Jessica's personal financier. But on a Thursday morning, while I was painting flowers on my new easel, Sarah came to my house with a grim expression that made my blood run cold. "Margaret, we need to talk. Daniel and Jessica have filed a formal mental incompetency lawsuit in family court. They're requesting that you be assigned a legal guardian." The words fell on me like stones. I knew it was a possibility, but hearing it out loud made it frighteningly real. Does that mean they can take control of my money? If a judge determines you're not capable of managing your affairs, yes, he could place Daniel as your legal guardian, which would give him total control over your finances. I sat heavily on my couch, feeling the weight of the deepest betrayal I had experienced in my life. My own son was trying to have me legally declared incompetent to steal my money. 3 weeks later, the day of the trial arrived. I woke up early, put on my best black suit, and looked at myself in the mirror with a determination I had never felt before. Today, not only would my mental capacity be judged, but my dignity as a person, my right to live free from abuse, my worth beyond my bank account. Sarah came at 7 a.m. to go over our strategy one last time. Margaret, remember, the burden of proof is on them. They have to prove you're incompetent. We just need to show that you're not. We arrived at the courthouse at 9:01 a.m. In the hallway, I saw Daniel in a new suit he probably bought for the occasion, and Jessica dressed in black as if she were at a funeral. Maybe it was the funeral of our family relationship. The trial lasted a full day. They brought witnesses who tried to paint me as confused and paranoid. We brought evidence of my mental competence and the financial abuse I had suffered. When it was my turn to testify, I told my story with clarity and dignity. I explained the $28,500 spent, the humiliation of being excluded from the baptism, and my decision to protect my own life. After 2 hours of deliberation, the judge returned with his decision. After reviewing all the evidence presented, he began, "It's obvious to this court that Mrs. Margaret Thompson is in full possession of her mental faculties. The evidence suggests this action is motivated by financial interests rather than genuine concern. The court completely denies the guardianship petition. I had won. I had not only won the lawsuit, but also my freedom, my dignity, my right to live free from abuse by those who supposedly loved me. That night, Eleanor organized a party at my house with all our friends. We toasted to justice, to freedom, to the sisterhood of strong women who support each other. Margaret, Elfrida told me, today you didn't just win a trial, you got your life back." She was right. For the first time in years, the future was completely mine. 3 months later, I sold my house and moved to a beautiful apartment near downtown. I donated half of my money to organizations that protect elderly victims of family abuse. With the other half, I started living the life I had always wanted. I traveled through Europe, took art classes, and joined volunteer groups. I never heard from Daniel and Jessica again. I heard from others that they had to move to a smaller apartment and that Jessica had found a job for the first time in years. Maybe adversity would teach them what my generosity never could, the value of honest work and independence. Some nights, when I look at the stars from my new balcony, I think about the woman I was a year ago, fearful, manipulated, believing I had to buy love. That woman is dead. And in her place, someone was born who understood a fundamental truth. True love never has a price, and freedom is never too expensive. My name is Margaret. I'm 68 years old, and I finally learned that the most important person I have to love and protect is myself. If you enjoyed my story, you can support me by making a donation so I can write more stories. Thank you in advance. And you, what would you do in this person's place? I'd love to hear your opinion, so please share with me in the comments. I'm always curious to know what you think, and also write to me where you're listening to this story from. For more life stories like this, like the video and subscribe to my channel. There are many other stories waiting for you. With love, until next time.